for everyone for coming out today for a nice little lunchtime talk, some light fodder before you go and appease your hunger after this. I'm Marie Martin. I'm a research scientist at Oregon State University, and I study the ecology of wild mammals and, for the most part, carnivores. So our work at Oregon State really focuses on how change and kind of the changing world around us can affect those species, whether that's for good or for bad. But this project has been a really fun collaboration for us with the Portland Urban Coyote Project, where much of the focus is actually on the human side of things. So how do humans perceive this kind of special carnivore that's a lot more flexible and plastic than a lot of the species that we study, and how can we use kind of people's perceptions to make sure that we're keeping coyotes as well as people safe. And kind of as the title suggests, our goal is always to keep coyotes wild, even in these urban settings. And so the real star of the show, the coyote, is a medium-sized mammal that historically occurred mostly just throughout the Great Plains and prairies of central United States and south central Canada, as well as much of Mexico, so kind of the south, like desert, arid kind of ecoregions. And so this darkest blob in the middle is actually the historical range of coyotes pre-European contact. So they really only occurred in this kind of central portion of the continent. And it wasn't until people arrived and started removing predators, so things like wolves and cougars that can suppress coyote populations, as well as converting land for agricultural use, allowed coyotes to really expand that range both eastward towards the East Coast and then west of the Cascades, where we're at in kind of the Portland metro area. And so coyotes have been reported in most urban areas in North America. Outside of Hawaii is the only place that they aren't found in North America at this point. And coyotes are often really successful in cities due to their generalist lifestyle. And so we think of generalists as these species that can make a living in a lot of different places. So they're really flexible, they're really resilient, and they're really resourceful. So coyotes we often think of as eating, small mammals for the most part, including this juvenile who's having fun with this mole before they chow down on it, which is reminiscent of my dog in the backyard if they get a squirrel. But even in the wild, coyotes will eat a range of things, including a lot of fruit and berries. They really take advantage of whatever is seasonally available on the landscape to them. And so you can imagine, much like our domestic canines, how they can do a really good job in an urban area. So we have a coyote eating some ho-hos, as well as a coyote who looks like it stole a watermelon from someone's picnic table or campsite. And so you can see how that natural kind of variation in what they eat and what they can make a living on can really set them up for success in these urban areas. And so, like people, coyotes have their own personalities and preferences. So some coyotes are more shy and pretty, will leave where people are. But there's also coyotes that become very bold and very acclimated to where people are. Sitting on cars, using furniture like our own dogs do. They start to learn kind of what's safe and what's within the realm of them not getting hurt, or kind of not getting that negative feedback from a person, and they'll take advantage of it. So we have shy coyotes and bold coyotes, and we kind of start to see that range of personalities more in urban areas where they're not being hunted or killed by people or by other predators too. And so most coyotes are generally wary and will kind of leave people, but conflicts can arise, especially in urban areas, depending on the time of year. So especially when coyotes are having their pups, as well as when juvenile coyotes are starting to leave home, like our own teenagers, and figure out what they're doing with their lives. Some of these negative interactions with people start to arise when coyote behavior and ecology kind of comes into conflict with human behavior and the way that we live our lives. And so that's kind of where the inception of the Portland Urban Coyote Project started, which began in 2010 due to a series of pretty negative interactions between coyotes and people in the Alameda neighborhood in Northeast Portland. So coyotes kind of being aggressive, interacting with people in sometimes disconcerting ways, kind of led to this idea of we can't just kind of wait to be reactive and wait for people to let us know that coyotes are kind of being naughty and kind of doing something that endangers both them as well as people. We need to kind of be proactive and try to understand when those interactions are happening, why they're happening, and how we can be a little bit more proactive in making sure that people and coyotes kind of coexist in these places. And so as part of a master's thesis, the Portland Urban Coyote Project director, Zuriel Van Bell, who would definitely, I feel like, be the ideal person to give this talk because she is a true human scientist, social scientist, and geographer. And as the director of the Portland Urban Coyote Project would be a wonderful person to have, but I'm kind of your consolation prize today to talk about the project. But so as part of her thesis work, she developed a tutorial that actually set out to walk people through how to identify coyotes, how to understand coyote behavior, and when it's time for people to kind of step in and try to mitigate some of those negative interactions that could happen with coyotes. And so the project's ongoing mission is to use community science, especially community-led observations and educational tools to understand how people and coyotes interact and to help the community learn about our coyote neighbors. And so we achieved this through collecting, mapping, and analyzing coyote sightings in the Portland metro area and providing free, accessible information about living with coyotes, which is all available at the Project Coyote website. And so a major component of the project, as I mentioned, is these community collected sightings in the greater Portland metro area. So this is just a screenshot and a little snippet that's a little bit washed out here, but if you can see those blue dots, each of those is a unique coyote sighting that's happened in the Portland metro area, and that's probably about 2% of the total sightings that we've collected over the last decade. So you can imagine there's a lot of people in Portland out and about living their lives, and there's a lot of opportunities for them to kind of help us collect these data points to understand where are the coyotes, what are they up to. And so when people submit a sightings form, which is available at the website, they submit some basic information, including just where and when they observed the coyote, how many coyotes were there, what were they doing? So were they kind of moving slowly through the landscape? Were they running quickly? Were they vocalizing, like howling or yipping? Were they stationary, lying down? Were they hunting? We kind of collect these data to understand where coyotes are doing these different behaviors, as well as then how people kind of perceive and interact with them when they're doing these different things. And an important part of this project too is understanding how are people feeling when they have this interaction with a coyote. So part of this is collecting data on did they enjoy the experience, did they not enjoy the experience, did they have mixed feelings or neutral feelings about it. And then we follow up with that with some kind of options that they can choose, as well as a text box where people can kind of write as much as they want to about what made them feel that way. So a lot of the time when people feel negative, they might be concerned about themselves or the pets or proximity to a really busy area. When people feel positive, they might just be really excited to see a coyote and maybe not realize that they occur in their own neighborhood. And so all of these data are anonymous, but they can still help us understand patterns in coyote and human behavior in the Portland area. And education and outreach has been a really important paralleling objective for the project. And so alongside those sightings forms, I mentioned Zuriel created a tutorial which essentially walks people through what is a coyote, what do they do, how do you identify a coyote versus a fox or a dog, as well as increase that knowledge again about coyote behavior and how to mitigate potential negative interactions. And so we've distilled these materials into K through 12 student education materials as well to try and get kind of the next generation excited and interested and knowledgeable about coyotes and what they can do to help their parents. So it's not just parents securing garbage, now you've got a whole fleet of young people excited to clean up after themselves as well. And a lot of this enthusiasm and energy for outreach has kind of converged in Coyote Palooza, which is still a relatively new education festival that we just had the second annual Coyote Palooza on May 31st of this year, and we'll be looking forward to next year's iteration as well. And so thinking briefly about some outcomes of this work, since 2010, the project has received over 20,000 sightings. throughout the Portland metro area, which is really awesome. And we're not going to see some of the paler values here, but what's really noticeable is these like dark blue purple blotches. And so those represent the densest coyote sightings in the Portland metro area. So people are seeing coyotes a lot in Forest Park, in Northeast Portland, around Mount Tabor, and then in some of these kind of like inner Southeast and then like Northeast areas. And so what's interesting is that oftentimes in the literature and when people hear about coyotes, they think that they should be concerned if they see a coyote during the daytime. Like, that's weird, carnivores are nocturnal, but coyotes are actually what's called cathemeral. And so that means that they can be active at any time of the day. It just kind of depends on what's going on around them. So in Portland, where, oh shoot, I see that's really washed out. So in Portland, 46% of sightings were at night when it was dark, and 54% were during the daytime when it's light. And so what's pretty interesting is that this aligns with a lot of other urban coyote research in that they seem to be a little bit more diurnal in urban areas because there's almost this human shield. So people keep coyotes safe from, you know, when you're in these wilder places where there are cougars and bears and tigers, oh my, like there's a lot of things that can compete with coyotes and can injure them or predate them that kind of prevent them from being active during the day or just might make them more wary in general. So about even between daytime and nighttime sightings. And sightings are pretty even per year since 2016, which is when the efforts really ramped up for the project. And so sightings are more common in the Portland area during the fall and winter, which is when those teenage coyotes, kind of the young of the year, are starting to set out from mom and dad and kind of try to figure out where they want to move. Just like people, again, there's a lot of parallels between the wild species that we study and people. They kind of have to set out on their own, and sometimes they'll set up shop right next to a parent and kind of stick around there, but sometimes they might be moving miles in order to set up their new home range. So in the fall and winter, when they're moving around the landscape, is often when we're more likely to encounter them because they're both, again, the teenagers who maybe are just a little less cautious than adults are in kind of when and where they're moving, but also because they're trying to figure out where their new home is going to be as they're maturing. And so yeah, these little juveniles, often the siblings will hang out and kind of cruise around together before breaking off and doing their own thing. But we found that coyotes in the Portland area are most often observed moving. So either moving slowly, so that's kind of walking or trotting along roads and trails, or moving quickly, so running and loping. And we get a lot of data, and I know for me, driving around Portland, a lot of the coyote sightings I've had are a quick flash of fur across the road as they're trying to kind of get through traffic and stuff like that, but much fewer observations of hunting and vocalizing and these other kind of behaviors that coyotes might be a little bit more selective with where and when they're doing those things. And so people often felt positive, but some did not enjoy or felt mixed about their sightings. And it was about 35%, 37% felt really positive, 25% did not enjoy their sighting, and then about a quarter felt pretty mixed feelings. And so kind of like I talked about briefly, one of the reasons people really enjoyed seeing coyotes, and this was true for positive, negative, and mixed feelings, was that they like wildlife. They really enjoy seeing wildlife. But when we get into the people who didn't enjoy it as much or maybe had mixed feelings about it, they often felt either unnerved for the safety of the coyote. So a lot of the time in the notes we'll get, I did not enjoy this because the coyote was very close to the road and traffic was moving really quickly. A lot of people say that they didn't enjoy it because they were walking their dog. And even if the coyote was described as minding its own business, they're just kind of concerned about conflict that might arise if the coyote becomes concerned about them and their pup. And so a lot of this helps us understand, again, what are people feeling? Because when we want to try and mitigate negative interactions, we have to meet people where they are. And so most of the time when people interact with the coyote, nothing's going to happen. And most of the time, the coyote is going to run away. But understanding when people don't feel safe and when they feel concerned about this helps us start to communicate ways that we can avoid any of those negative interactions and ways that people can make themselves feel more safe too. And so using kind of some of these printable flyers and materials that we have on the website, remind people coyotes live here, and whether we like it or not, love them, hate them, don't really care either way, they will always be here. But there's ways that we can kind of mitigate our interactions with them to keep each other safe. And so we often distribute in places where there have been perceived conflicts or confirmed conflicts, kind of reminders to people. A really great way to avoid negative interactions with coyotes is making sure you're not feeding them actively, but also in the ways that coyotes are very resourceful, and I shared that photo of them digging into some ho-hos, making sure that maybe there's not some other food sources that they could get into. So Portland is a very fruited city. It has so many fruit trees and a lot of these resources that we might not think of as free food, but a coyote who's kind of drifting along yard to yard encounters a nice peach tree with a bunch of downed fruit, or an apple tree with downed fruit, might start going to town. So if you have fruit trees, I actually saw I think it's the Portland Fruit Tree Project, actually will send out teams of volunteers. If you don't want all of the fruit, they'll help you pick stuff up. As well as if you aren't able to make use of it, putting into like secured compost bins and places that aren't accessible to coyotes, as well as all the other myriad critters like raccoons and opossums that we don't want getting into our bins. But again, a lot of this is about understanding kind of how to like work with people to make them more comfortable interacting with coyotes. And so the education piece of this is where that comes in again. And so the website with the tutorial gets about 2,000 visitors per month, which is really exciting. And a large proportion of those people go on to do the tutorial, which provides really specific and digestible information to help identify coyotes. So oftentimes we'll find, sometimes people are actually seeing huskies or other domestic dogs that might look like a coyote to us, especially at a quick glance, but are actually a dog. And so the tutorial really walks people through characteristics that help differentiate by size, as well as kind of behavior and morphology, how coyotes differ from those dogs. And then also provides important information about how to kind of identify behaviors, especially coyotes who might be behaving tame and kind of not scarable. So when a coyote kind of trots away from you, that's a great sign. When a coyote starts to hang out around you and is not maybe afraid by you making noise or talking, that's a good sign that they might be starting to become habituated. And so the tutorial walks people through how to identify that, as well as then how to, we call it hazing, because essentially we're just trying to reinstill a little bit of fear into the coyote so that they don't get too comfortable around us in the future. So there's a nice little instruction manual about making a hazing rattle. So you can use an old coffee can and putting change in it. Essentially anything that's just kind of loud and noisy is usually enough to kind of scoot along the coyote and keep them moving. And so these workbooks and materials have been made accessible to children and community members, which has also been a really important part of this process. As we found, for a lot of people, the online materials are accessible, but oftentimes at outreach events, we found people who hadn't even heard of the Urban Coyote Project or had never even realized that there was a tutorial or something that they could do online. And so trying to make these materials available in kind of community centers and posted around neighborhoods has really helped kind of drum up some attention for the Coyote Project and make people aware of the resources they have within reach to kind of feel comfortable and as happy as they can living alongside coyotes. And so the kind of final piece of education is Coyote Palooza, which, like I mentioned, we had our second annual Coyote Palooza this year. And we had over 12 collaborating organizations behind that and over 1,000 visitors at the Portland Farmers Market downtown, which was really exciting. And so the outreach happened with all people of all ages, from children to adults, and really was focused again on how to avoid conflicts. So again, storing garbage, keeping pets inside and supervised, no feeding of coyotes, whether it's on purpose or accidentally, as well as coyote behavior and ecology and how to haze coyotes. And again, here's a nice little visual of the hazing rattles that we built, as well as Zuriel's Schnauzer Nietzsche modeling a coyote vest, which has a lot of fun spikes on it to kind of deter hawks and coyotes, and everything else from the small pets. Those are always a fun one to see. But there are a bunch of fun prizes too as part of a raffle for folks who went to each booth and chatted with us for a while, with the grand prize being an enclosed catio. So this has been a big part of things as well, is that we understand people having outdoor pets, but just acknowledge that just like a car is a risk to an outdoor pet, a coyote is a risk to them as well. And one of the easiest ways to kind of mitigate heartache and potential negative interactions with wildlife is just to provide enrichment to our pets as well as ourselves in a way that's safe and secure. And then, kind of downstream, this also keeps our kitty here from getting any birds incidentally as yeah.
Would you like questions now or later?
Maybe I don't have too much left. If we can do at the end, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. And so, yeah, just next steps here actually. So kind of wrapping up. The project is continuing data collection and analysis, so we would love if people submit sightings if and when they see them. Educational materials are available for free at the project website and can be shared with friends, family, neighbors. Here on campus would be a great place as well. And for people who are interested in a more hands-on role, you can join the Coyote Crew, is a new group that we've started. And so for people who want to help as kind of an active response team when coyotes are being a little bit naughty or people need reminders about not feeding them, we actually send out a group of volunteers who, there's a lot of them that rotate, so it's not like someone's a doctor and on call or anything, but people just put in a couple hours a month to kind of act as a response team. So going out to, say, Northeast Portland, if someone had a coyote follow their dog, they'll go up and put up flyers, put up materials, and kind of just like try to remind people in the area that, hey, a coyote has been spotted doing some things that we don't want it to here recently. Make sure you bring your hazing rattle with you, and if you see a coyote, just give it a shout and a rattle, and kind of trying to use the community to build together towards a safer kind of coexistence between coyotes and people. And we have a little bit of time, but mark your calendar for May, June 2026, when the third annual Coyote Palooza will be. We'll be doing a lot of similar kind of events and activities as we did last year, but are always looking for opportunities to kind of grow and develop for that as well. And so with that, would love to just acknowledge all the partner organizations and especially the folks that we get to collaborate with as part of the Urban Coyote Project. And one person who I don't know if anyone had the pleasure of meeting was Bob Salinger, who worked for a long time at Bird Alliance as well as Willamette Riverkeeper. And he passed away suddenly last year, but was a real champion for conservation and was one of the people who helped kind of conceive of and get the Urban Coyote Project started, and was a real champion for making sure that people and wildlife can live alongside and coexist, because we're not going anywhere, they're not going anywhere. And so I think our goal and Bob's goal was always to try and make sure that we live as well as we can with the resources we have. So I would be very happy to take questions now if anyone has them.